Okay, this is actually take 3. This is lecture 16. It is the Pathwork, and it's called Spiritual Nourishment. Greetings in the name of the Lord. Blessed is this hour. Blessed are all of you, my friends. Again, I have the pleasure of welcoming some new friends here tonight, and I want to tell all of you, just let go. For this hour, do not think of any of your doubts. Just let your soul speak and give you the answer. This can happen if you are open. It is not surprising if a person confronted for the first time with this phenomena, that a spirit should indeed be able to talk through a human being, cannot readily accept this. Many things are possible, however, of which you know nothing as yet. So just be open and wait. And eventually you will see that not only this is so, but much more exists of which you could not even dream presently. You will not only be able to accept all of this intellectually, but you will actually experience it. And not only things that have nothing to do with you personally, but your lives will change when you know certain truths. This will give your lives direction and purpose. So this will give your lives direction and purpose. Well, now you often do not know what this life is all about and why you should have to go through so much hardship, so much testing. And yet there is a sense to all of this. And also, this is directed to all of my friends. Relax, untie your knots, be open. And you will receive answers again, as you have so many times in the past. Man's problems deal so often with his daily bread, with material questions. And important as this daily bread may be, it is only of secondary importance to the spiritual daily bread that man needs. Much talk going around about the importance of the right food and vitamins and minerals and proteins and diets. Oh, it is indeed good that mankind has begun to find out about these facts. But for us spirits, we see such a tremendous discrepancy between the material nourishment and the lack of spiritual nourishment. The latter is every bit as important as the former, and we see spiritually underfed, undernourished people. So many suffer from spiritual vitamin deficiency. The soul or the spirit needs food so badly, and often without the person being aware of it. And only if the food is supplied, taken, and digested, then all of your other needs are automatically taken care of, including your material daily bread. So when your spirit is starved, it must have its consequences. And the same thing applies to hygiene. Mankind has made great progress in the direction of physical hygiene. Today, people bathe and shower daily and keep their bodies clean, and at the same time, so many unhygienic souls are going around. Now you may wonder how this cleaning of the soul or the nourishment of the spirit is to be accomplished. What has to be done practically? Spiritual nourishment is the regular intake of spiritual truths. Even repetitions are important, and of spiritual laws. And the outlook on life from the spiritual point of view, which is often contrasting to your material point of view, so that one day your outlook will change accordingly. This spiritual nourishment has to become a regular habit, for it is possible that you have lived without it for a long time. You get so accustomed to it, just like a person who gets accustomed to eating the wrong kind of food and does not supply the essential factors the body needs in order to remain strong and vigorous. So one can go along for quite a while in that way without ever connecting cause and effect. The physically undernourished person will complain about tiredness, weakness, or other physical symptoms without thinking about the real reason. And the same applies to the spiritually undernourished. The emotional problems, the lack of inner peace, and all the other symptoms of this deficiency are seldom consciously connected with the cause of it at all. Spiritual food does not come to you by itself. You have to go out and get it the same way that you have to get your physical nourishment. You have to earn your bread. You have to go to the trouble to provide for it, buy it, prepare it, and eat it. And this is just as true concerning your spiritual bread as your physical bread. You earn your spiritual bread by your sincere desire to receive it. You prepare your spiritual food by looking for the right source for you, by going to a certain amount of trouble in order to get it. And you digest it by thinking through for yourself what you have heard or read, by meditating about it, by trying to apply it to yourself in some way that something will change for the better within you. Therefore, spiritual nourishment is in one part listening to lectures, reading the appropriate literature, and also conversations about the subject with people who know more about it than yourself. And on the other hand, spiritual nourishment is also prayer and meditation in the right way. So here again, it needs the fight within yourself to overcome the resistance. There will always be the voice which says, I'm too tired, I do not feel like it. It does not matter if I'm not doing it today. So what difference does it make? Why should God mind if I pray to him today? No, God does not mind, my friends, but your soul and your spirit will starve. For by opening yourself up every day, you receive the strength and the light that maintains you, that guides you in the right direction. The cleansing of the soul, which is equally important, is not even more so in a way, the cleansing of the soul, which is equally important, if not even more so in a way, should be done in this way. Many times a person is unaware of certain faults and also attitudes and opinions or emotional reactions. People carry many of these trends since an early age due to some influence in their surroundings and also due to certain happenings in their lives. These attitudes may or may not have had their justification at that past time, but they are completely obsolete at the present time, and they're quite harmful. Yet, unaware of the existence of these old reactions and their harmfulness, people carry them still with them unconsciously, and they still react in a certain way because of them. So you have to examine yourself, what you really think, what you really feel, what you really want. And thus you make an inventory of your emotional trends and currents. And in that way, by re-examining them, you can oust what has no more room in you and change your currents accordingly. And thus you put order in your soul. And in this way, you will be able to change your will direction where necessary. You may even change your desires having done this. Only when you do this in consciousness can you assert these various feelings, desires, and attitudes, and so on. Then you will be able, with spiritual nourishment, which you take in from outside, to see whether these tendencies are in accordance with the spiritual laws. You will thus see whether you have not broken some spiritual law in the past, quite unconsciously, by your wrong inner direction. And when these unconscious tendencies are within you, they create a great deal of harm. They create conflict. It creates a disorder within you. And this represents the uncleansed or the unhygienic soul. And this is the way we see it. There is so much in there that has no place in it, that ought to be washed away or ousted. So, cleanse your souls as you cleanse your bodies. And every day this ought to be done. Every day you ought to review your day, examine your reactions to various incidents that have taken place during the day. And this is the only way you can cleanse your spirits, your souls. And only in this way you will be open and receptive for the proper nourishment so that you can grow spiritually every day. And in this attitude, nothing that happens will ever depress you. No, my friends, this will be the truth. This is the truth. Even the unpleasant things in life will not have the power to tear you down, for you will thus be able to learn more about yourself and about spiritual law and about divine truth, what you have still to accomplish and what you have already accomplished. Your own failures, which are unavoidable, will give you strength instead of weakness. And when you view yourself in this way daily, if you consider your failures with the attitude of, what can I learn about them? What does it show me where I still have to work in my efforts of self-purification? Nothing that happens in your life is good or bad in itself. Do not believe this fallacy. The best thing that can happen to you could appear to you like a disaster at that moment. And it will be a disaster if you have the wrong attitude. And a happening that seems to you very fortunate can turn out to be quite unfavorable if you do not learn your spiritual lesson from it. So everything that happens to you can be good if you make it so, if you use it from a spiritual point of view, and if you learn from it so that you can continue to grow spiritually and thus grow into happiness. This is the only way you can direct your life instead of being a slave and being directed by it. So it is in your power. You have it in your hand to use it. But often you do not want to use it. No, It seems to you so much easier to give in to the mood of depression or hopelessness. And for this allows you to be passive, and consciously or unconsciously, you get to blame some fate or circumstances or other people for what has happened to you. No, my friends, this way you make indeed a slave of yourself. And this way you make yourself dependent on outer happenings over which indeed you have no control. Instead, say to yourself, if anything unpleasant happens, the answer must be within me. The roots or cause of it, as well as the solution. So pray in this instant to God to help you find the answer. And have the absolute will to look yourself squarely in the face. If you have done this, if you have overcome the first resistance to do so, it is only difficult this first moment. You will get the answer as inevitably as the sun follows rain, as life must follow death. And this will bring great happiness into your soul. A happiness that you have never known before, because there is no other happiness comparable to the one when you conquer yourself, when you decide, I am no longer a slave. From now on, I direct my life. In order to be able to do that, I, first of all, have to face within me what I may not like or what may be uncomfortable. And it is simple and only difficult the first instance of decision until you go through with it. Man has much more power than he realizes. The willpower that lies enfolded within you is something you do not realize, my friends, none of you. Since the willpower is of great importance in the life of a person, I would like to talk about this subject now. So in the first place, I want to say there is no person alive who has no willpower. This does not exist, and whoever says, I am weak, I have no willpower, is fooling himself, because it appears to him a much easier course to be directed instead of being the director of life, and instead of taking the responsibility upon his own shoulders concerning everything about his life. So it is only a question to unfold this willpower. The second question is in what direction this willpower should be unfolded. For all of you who say you do not have any willpower, you constantly use this willpower without realizing that you do so. You are doing it subconsciously, and you are often doing it in the wrong direction because it is used unconsciously instead of consciously. There are many people who rightly say whatever a person really wants, he can accomplish. More or less, this is true. But whether what you want is indeed the best thing for you is another question. Therefore, the will-directing power in a person has to be examined by the person who wants, above all, to grow spiritually and to come close to God. This examination has to be conducted in the light of spiritual law and truth. I have mentioned some time ago there are currents coming from the higher self which are often distorted by the lower self. And I have promised you to talk about this more explicitly. Now here is a good example, because willpower in itself is a most valuable asset. And without it, indeed, there can never be any spiritual progress. So, willpower comes from the higher self, and it will remain a pure current of light and clean strength as long as it is used for a spiritual purpose, for spiritual growth, for God, with God, in God. The moment the conscious will uses it in the wrong direction, it is distorted by the lower self and becomes an impure force. Let us take, for example, a criminal. He uses his willpower very obviously and noticeably in a wrong direction. He wants to have his will at all costs. For him, the gratification of his personal desires stands so much in the foreground that he is even willing to harm other people in order to achieve his goal, his ego. The higher developed person will not act that way because he knows crime is sin. And yet, he too may use this willpower in the wrong direction, though unconsciously, and of course not in deeds which obviously harm other people, but in feeling and inner reactions that also put the gratification of the ego in the foreground. This is the breaking of a law and has its consequences in inner disharmony and or outer conflicts. This whole procedure remains in the subconscious because this person knows somehow that what he wants is wrong, and yet he is not ready to give it up. he wants it nevertheless, and therefore the willpower continues to flow in this wrong direction without the conscious awareness of it. This is often a very important factor of an emotionally disturbed person. All this does not concern crime or sin in its broadly understood meaning. There is sin and sin, and it is only a question of degree. Anything that deviates from a spiritual law is sin, or ignorance if you want, but both are the same. Now, a person often wants something very badly that is in no conflict with recognized sin. It may not even violate the recognized standards of ethics by your society. And yet, what he wants may be wrong for him and for his life. It could be right for another person because sin, or the breaking of spiritual law, is not only something generally established for everyone alike, but also something very personal that deviates with each individual. For one person to become a writer may be his destiny, and in this way he can best fulfill the task he is supposed to fulfill in his life, in this life. For another person, by becoming a writer, he may neglect the task he has really come to fulfill. And you cannot say to become a writer is a sin, yet for a particular person, it may be the wrong thing to do. Now, if he uses his willpower blindly, he will become a writer, but he will not be happy, because you can only be happy if you fulfill according to the task you have taken on for this incarnation. And everyone has a task, my friends. Everyone. Wherever you stand, you have a task, whether you have a family or whether you live quite alone. But do not look so far in finding this task. Do not even think first of other people whom you may desire to help. You will be able to do that too, certainly, but only after you have found yourself first. Before you can fulfill a task with other people, you have to first fulfill the task within yourself. And that means you have to gain spiritual development, purification, complete self-knowledge as much as possible according to your strength and development. When you do this, you are on the right path, and you are already fulfilling a part of your task, whatever the rest of the task may be. But if you begin with yourself, the rest will come to you without you having to move a finger, and I can assure you of that. But begin with yourself. Begin with yourself. Coming back to the question of willpower, the most important thing in order to use this willpower in the right direction, is that a person says, first of all, once and for all, whatever will there is within me, I will use it according to the will of God. And when you do that, my friends, the willpower already alive within you will often take a changed direction. And even though you may not like it at first, you must become happy, because God knows better than you do what is best for you and what gives you most happiness. All of a sudden, your problems will disappear. And I can promise you that. For those of you whose will was still dormant to a large degree, suddenly it will surge through you with a clean strength that you have never suspected exists within you. All tiredness, all weakness, all weariness, physical or emotional, will disappear, as though you have never known it. If you really mean it, sincerely mean it, that you put God's will above all else, if you promise him or her and keep this promise, if you say and live, whatever willpower I have, my will is used according to thy will. This is the beginning of the change to the better in life, in your life. This is the foundation. When you keep this in mind and do this in spite of the fact that many times your own will seems very much more tempting, you like to say to yourself, why should God have anything against my doing so and so? And this is such a little thing, it cannot do any harm. It cannot possibly make any difference. And then, of course, you do not even want to wait and find out the answer, because you have already accepted the answer you like best. And thus you have put your will above the will of God. And there are no little and big things, my friends. For what seems tremendous for you may be very little in absolute truth, and vice versa. The littlest thing may be a stepping stone to the bigger and the most important. The littlest thing may be a very significant symptom, key to all your problems. So do not overlook it. Do not minimize it. And have the confidence that what God wills for you must be better than your short-sightedness, even if it means a little sacrifice at first. And when you put your life really and truly in the hands of God, if you give yourself up to him, You must become happy. And there is simply no other alternative. It is the only possible consequence, but it leads often through a door that appears like a sacrifice at present. And when your gaze is still clouded, let me read that again because I sort of read it weirdly. But it leads often through a door that appears like a sacrifice at present, and when your gaze is still clouded. But afterwards, you will not be able to understand yourself. But afterwards, you will not be able to understand yourself. What seems so important and so attractive or so difficult to do so hard to give up, will afterwards appear like a burden you have carried around. And it really is. For everything is a burden that separates you from God. Everything, my friends. And when you mobilize your willpower to use it when you mobilize your willpower to use it first of all, according to the will of God, you will have the right mixture of activeness and passiveness and initiative and detachedness. Wherever it is right that you use strength to fight, to overcome, to activate, you will become strong enough to do so. You will have the support of the spirit world of God to help you. And whenever it will be right for you to let yourself go in the stream and not stem against it, you will find peace in that. For in that moment and for that situation, it will be the right thing to be passive. And do not ask me, how should I know what God desires? What is his will? How do I know when to fight and be active and when to be passive? When you really want to know, you will have the answer. And if you really want to know, you will take the time to go into meditation about this precise subject, and you will ask God. And it will show you the answer. And in many ways, he can do so. And I have talked about this many times. I do not have to repeat it. The problem is not that you do not know the will of God. The problem remains solely whether you really want to know the will of God, whether you have decided that you will fulfill the will of God, even against your apparent interest at this little moment now. So if you fulfill these conditions, you must receive the answer. And again, we notice that you receive answers to your prayers, to your questions, what the will of God may be, all the time. But you often do not want to see it. You deliberately keep your eyes closed. My dear friends, only the first time is so difficult to do so. To really give your life up to God with all its implications. And once you have done it and experienced the peace and the joy, it will never be difficult anymore, because then your confidence will be established. And why is it so difficult to do so the first time? Because there still lurks a doubt within you. Maybe God's will make me unhappy. And if you sincerely test yourself, you will find that this is the explanation why you hesitate to go through with this simple procedure. There is the key to everything. And now, my dear friends, I am ready for questions. Okay, I'm going to do one question. And this is a lecture 16, Spiritual Nourishment. This is post-riot on the Capitol. And if you want more help, or if you want to meet a helper who can help usher in more understanding of the Pathwork Lectures, go to www.pathwork.org and inquire. There are amazing, amazing Pathwork helpers who can take you to the next level in your search. Question: I was wondering whether you would tell us whether there is any conscious life on other planets. And the answer, yes indeed. Each planet, star, etc. is a sphere where spiritual life exists. The many spheres we are talking about. And that is all I'm going to do. Be safe, be kind, choose love.